welcome to this arts and arts education discussion at the Republican National Convention. One of the things that I want to start with is to simply say that we're very proud to be here to have this event in the Minnesota Children's Museum. Pleased to be able to hold our event in a cultural institution and one that captures the spirit of what the arts do in sharing arts and culture with the youngest of our citizens. And not just that sharing, but also economic vitality and jobs. And speaking of jobs, a hand for the Riverside duo who ushered us in, the performers, working artists. And to say a word about Minnesota, I'd like to ask Sheila Smith, Executive Director of Minnesota Citizens for the Arts, to come up for a second.
To welcome all of you to this great state of Minnesota, members of Congress and press, and of course the artists in the room, and I'm especially excited about having Debbie Ellen on the panel. I'm such a big fan of hers. We would like to first of all thank Americans for the Arts for their leadership on the national level in creating a national movement on behalf of the arts. I've been in my job for 12 years, and the transformation that they have created in focusing the national conversation on the importance of the arts to our communities has just been tremendous. And that's due to Bob and to Nina and to Randy Cohen, who does the research, and I'd like to thank you all for the wonderful work you do. I think it's a very fitting thing that we're having this panel in Minnesota. In recent economic impact studies of the arts in Minnesota that we did in cooperation with Americans for the Arts, we found that the arts in Minnesota have over $1 billion in economic impact annually. We have over 1,400 nonprofit arts organizations and over 30,000 artists just in our state alone. So multiply those numbers by 50 and imagine the strength and diversity of the arts community in our country. One of the things that makes the community here so strong is the strength of public-private partnerships. We have strong foundations such as the McKnight Foundation. We have strong support from the state of Minnesota, and we have many wonderful businesses and corporations who support the arts in Minnesota. One of the newest partnerships we have here is a coalition that's putting together the Clean Water, Land, and Legacy Amendment. It's a constitutional amendment that will create dedicated funding for conservation and arts and culture. And a symbol of that coalition are the Vote Yes bobbers that are available out on the sign-in table. Sportsmen are a very big part of our coalition. We're looking forward to November 4th to passing this amendment, which will greatly increase funding for the arts in Minnesota and then allow us to provide much more access to the arts to all Minnesotans. We're very excited about it. So for those of you from Minnesota, just for a second, if you want to donate, there are donation envelopes out there on the table, but that's not why I'm here. I'm here to welcome you all to Minnesota. Thank you so much for coming. I look forward to the discussion.
A little over a year ago, we started in the state of New Hampshire, where we hired campaign staff to attend many of the presidential campaign events and ask all of the candidates what their arts or arts education positions were. We have a 10-point plan, a policy brief that you can get on the way out. We had opportunities to meet at the end with the Clinton campaign, the Obama campaign, and the McCain campaign to discuss arts policies that might be in their new administration. The Action Fund has a Congressional Arts Report Card coming out, and a preview is on the table on your way out so you can see what people's voting records are. We are commemorating this particular event with a special limited edition poster that we commissioned with artist John Baldessari, a member of our artist committee, who designed a poster that you can also pick up on the way out, a collector's item. So with this, there's too many people to acknowledge. I do want to say that Tom Schmidt, Vice Chairman of NAM, is here with us. Very pleased to have you here. And today, we're going to present to you a panel of distinguished arts supporters and then have some time to socialize and celebrate upstairs and to celebrate the coming election of many pro-arts candidates up and down the ballot. So I'd like to introduce first Governor Mike Huckabee. In the past year, Governor Huckabee campaigned for the Republican nomination for president, and we are all so pleased to see him raising the issue of arts education at almost every campaign event, and most notably in his interview on Meet the Press with Tim Russert when he announced his campaign. Mike Huckabee was the first presidential candidate to endorse the arts. I had a chance to speak with him almost 2 years ago. And he did it in his campaign announcement. That set the bar high for all the other presidential candidates. And the arts in America owe a great debt of gratitude to Governor Mike Huckabee. And I want to say that. He also gave me weight loss tips, and I've lost 35 pounds since then, so I appreciate that. I want to next introduce Representative Todd Tiahrt, Kansas, began serving the 4th District of Kansas in Congress in 1995. He was appointed to the powerful House Appropriations Committee in 1997 and currently serves as the senior Republican on the Appropriations Subcommittee on Interior, Environment, and Related Agencies, where he oversees funding of the National Endowment for the Arts. And through his good efforts, for the last years, the National Endowment for the Arts and the other agencies have received significant increased support. And so we owe a debt of gratitude to Congressman Tiahrt as well. Tom Cochran, legendary executive director of the United States Conference of Mayors, great leader of the mayors, who often are the biggest allies of the arts in the public sector. And I'm wearing a pin, the 10-point plan of the United States Conference of Mayors to the next mayor, mayor of America, the President of the United States. And I'm so pleased to say that one of these 10 points is the arts. First time ever in a platform of that magnitude to the new President of the United States. What I want to introduce next is Debbie Allen, an acclaimed Emmy Award-winning actor, dancer, choreographer, director, producer, and author, as well as a recipient of the Golden Globe Award. She is a member of the President's Committee on the Arts and the Humanities, and among various of her work on Broadway were featured roles in Raisin, West Side Story, and Bob Fosse's Sweet Charity. She is also the founder and the director of the Debbie Allen Dance Academy. Thank you so much for being here with us. Tom Horn was elected Arizona State Superintendent of Public Instruction in 2002 and was re-elected to a second four-year term in 2006. He has served in the Arizona legislature from 1996 to 2000, during which time he chaired the Academic Accountability Committee and served as vice chair of the Education Committee. From Senator McCain's home state, he brings 24 years of school board experience as a member of the board of the third largest district in the state. He's a classical pianist, a choral singer, performed with Boston Pro Musica Chorale, and can reach, I understand, a low E. So congratulations very much.
That's a long way down.
I can't do that.
John Rich, country music singer, songwriter, and acclaimed producer, a native of Texas. He is one half of the multi-platinum duo Big and Rich, whose signature song, Save a Horse, Ride a Cowboy, was released in 2004. Rich's writing credits include the Gretchen Wilson ACM award-winning single of the year, Redneck Woman, and co-wrote Big and Rich's #1 single, Lost in This Moment. He recently served as one of the judges and mentors of NBC's music competition series Nashville Star, and they have performed at various GOP conventions, and this year Rich wrote Raisin McCain, a song in honor of John McCain. Thank you so much. And finally, Governor Matt Blunt. Governor Blunt took office in January 2005. The state's arts budget had been cut to $500,000. Governor Blunt's goal was to restore complete funding to the arts by the time his term expires in 2009. Since taking office, Governor Blunt has steadily grown annual state appropriations for the arts, increasing funding by approximately 700%. I think that that's a stellar accomplishment. He's got a year to go. And with that, I leave you in the hands, very capable hands, of Governor Mike Huckabee.
Thank you very much, Bob. Thank you. This sort of reminds me of the set of Oprah. I'm not sure how we're supposed to do this. I just want to make sure that all the panelists understand this is not going to turn into Jerry Springer, okay? Keep our images squared away. An honor to be with all of the panelists, and I want to say thanks to all of you for coming, and to NAM for the sponsorship of this afternoon's program. I think you'd probably find among all of us, as you will see this afternoon in the course of the discussion, that there is a passion that we all share about music and art for every student in America. It is a passion that is deep within me. One of the signature pieces of legislation that I was very proud of was making sure that we passed legislation that mandated that every student in Arkansas, K through 12, have music and art, not or, music and art education taught by certified teachers every single week. It was a fight to get there because there's always people who will say, you know what, those are great things, but we can't afford them. And I always came to say, we can't afford to not have them because the future of our economy depends upon it. The future economy is going to be a creative economy. And the only way that we really have a full education system for our kids is to make sure that both the left and the right sides of the brain are being properly stimulated and that we're really educating students and not just pouring data into their brains as if it was a dead data download. A computer that has a vast database but no operating system is worthless. It would be better as a boat anchor than it would be as a processing machine. It is the CPU that makes it work. Well, the fact is that if we have an educational system that focuses only on transferring information from the teacher to the student, but the student is not stimulated to use that right side of the brain to know what to do with that information, we've cheated many of our kids. I'm convinced the reason 1 out of every 3 kids drops out of school today in America, it's not because the student is somehow unintelligent. It's because that student might just be bored. Bored because his or her talent hasn't been touched. And in many cases, it's because we've removed arts and music programs out of our schools rather than to make sure that they're there for every student. The fact is that music and art education is not expendable, it's not extraneous, and it's not extracurricular. It is an essential part of the entire education for a student if we're really serious about being competitive in a marketplace that involves the whole world. And in fact, I'm convinced that the way America can move itself forward, educationally and economically, is to put a new focus on music and art for every student so that every student grows up with a sense of the creative and an understanding of not only what there is, but what there could be. And I think you're going to find from all these panelists a similar passion. Unfortunately, it's not enough if the passion exists in this room. We have to make sure that it transcends beyond. So the goal that I hope we can achieve here today is to not simply talk about why we believe it, because we do, but what can we do to translate the enthusiasm and the passion that we have into public policy. My personal experience is there's 2 things that have to happen. One is a focus, the other is funding. And in state government, and I'm going to turn to Governor Blunt here in just a moment, usually what we do not force, we do not fund. And I'm convinced that you have to create mandated legislation in each state because if you force it, you will fund it. If you do not have to do it, you will not do it. Something else will take the place. Governor Blunt, good to see you, my neighbor and friend. And it's pretty remarkable. I mean, to take $500,000 in the arts for a state like Missouri, go to 11.3, it's an extraordinary thing. And I'm sure there were many people pushing back on that and saying we have bigger issues, more important issues. Tell me what were maybe the trigger points to get Missouri to move in that direction. How did you lead them there? And what would you suggest to other governors and to people who could influence their governors?
And I think you're right. We all believe in the inherent value and worth of art. We know that it helps to express our deepest emotions and thoughts and really is a reflection of who we are as a people. We all understand that. I think you have to look for some other arguments sometimes to convince the others that we should invest in the arts. Missouri, we had somewhat of a unique situation. We actually had a dedicated tax, but in Missouri, all of our dedicated taxes are subject to appropriation. So the dedicated tax was getting spent all over the rest of state government. So a part of my argument was that it is good fiscal discipline to spend dedicated taxes on their dedicated purpose. And that meant slowly restoring what we call the out-of-state athletes and entertainers tax to its intended recipients. And the primary recipient is indeed the arts funding, Missouri Arts Council, and others. So one was just good stewardship of tax dollars. We made that case, I think, effectively. The second is just the economic benefit of the arts. We are a competitive economy in Missouri. We're a very diverse economy. A lot of our economy is knowledge-based. Agriculture is our biggest industry, but we have a lot of knowledge-based workers, and we want more knowledge-based jobs. And you have to have cultural amenities for knowledge-based workers, Mike, as you know. You need the arts. They want to have arts programming. They want to see that there's arts in schools that their kids are going to attend. So we thought it was an effective way to attract knowledge-based workers, and that's knowledge-based jobs, which helps our economy to grow. We also have a lot of great cultural assets in Missouri, great museums in our largest cities and also some of our smallest communities. And we made the case that cultural tourism is important in our state's economy, just as it is in most states. The cultural tourists tend to spend more than any other type of tourist. When they come to visit your state, they're going to spend more dollars within your state's boundaries. And then it was good for economic development to focus around cultural tourism, which meant arts funding for, again, our largest institutions like the St. Louis Art Museum and the Nelson Rockefeller Art Museum in Kansas City, to some of our smaller community-based arts activities. So I think those sort of non-traditional arts arguments, not just about the inherent value of the arts and how much it does to enrich our culture, but the economic value of the arts, I think, was really critical in Missouri as we made the case to legislators to slowly increase that funding, and that's worked. We've gone from the 49th state in per capita funding to last budget, the 14th state. And we think actually with this budget we'll probably be in the top 10 states in terms of per capita arts funding.
Right. And may your tribe increase among the governors, for sure. Thank you, Matt.
Thanks, Mike.
Congressman, one of the criticisms that often are thrown at Congress is pork barrel spending, that people's tax dollars are taken in Washington and then they're tossed about. You're a Republican, a conservative, but on the other hand, you have been a major advocate for arts funding. I'm sure that brings some criticism from some of your colleagues and maybe even some of your constituents, but tell me, what do you say to those who believe that funding for the arts is just another barrel of pork out there?
Well, it does get some bad comments once in a while, but I think you have to understand where we are today in our economy and what the next economy is going to be like. The next economy is going to incorporate a lot of creativity, whether it's through electronic design or through aeronautical design. Just think back 5 years what a cell phone was like, and then today what a BlackBerry is like, and how much more versatile. Well, that type of creativity comes from the arts, and I think we have to invest in the next economy. So we can be short-sighted, and we have been in the past. But if we want to prepare to compete with a China, which graduates 500,000 engineers every year, and America only graduates 70,000, we're going to have to take the people that we do have dedicated to the next economy and give them the tools they need to come up with the next ideas. And I think a basis of that, a foundation, it starts in our elementary schools and on our junior highs and our high schools, and takes on into our communities the creativity that we find in the arts. And so it's an investment for me. It's an investment in our future. Plus, I just love the arts. You know, I love sketching. I love acting and singing, and to be on the same platform with the talent that's here is really humbling for me, because I know that I can accord a few guitar strings. I can't play the bass, I can't write songs, and I can't sing, but I sure do think that that's a big basis of how we're going to invest in our culture to be ready for the next economy.
And let me ask Congressman specifically about National Endowment for the Arts, often a source of controversy among many constituencies. How do you defend the National Endowment, and where are you able to show that there is a value in the investment that happens there?
Well, I think to understand where the National Endowment of the Arts is today with broad bipartisan support, you have to understand where we've come over the last couple of decades. At one time, most of the money with the National Endowment of the Arts was spent in New York and California, and a lot of controversial conflict associated with some of the work. Under the current group that we have at the National Endowment of the Arts, under the leadership of Dana Gioia, he has moved the arts from just a few people to every congressional district in the nation. And he's used programs like Poetry Out Loud. As an accomplished poet, Dana Joy understands the value of Poetry Out Loud, and he's written some wonderful things. The Big Read, which my wife is involved with, getting kids to read. If you look at our culture and kids aren't reading, they're not doing well in school, which makes them more subject to being involved with drugs and gang activity and jail time. And it's just getting kids to read is a big part of the future of this country. So the National Endowment of Arts is now moving into reading. They're moving into the school system. They have jazz as part of their scenario, the Shakespeare in the communities. They're doing some wonderful things in each and every congressional district. And members of Congress are now seeing how we've moved from just California and New York to home, to our district. In Kansas, we're doing the Big Read. My wife has been going to several of the communities and encouraging that. We're reading Maya Antondia, which is a book about settlers on the early plains. It's a very interesting book, and it gives you, it kind of captures that pioneer spirit that so much of us see. So what's happened with the National Endowment of the Arts, to get to broad bipartisan support, has been taking it to the communities and involving the communities. And that's been a big sales point for each and every member of Congress. And I think that's where we're at today, and why we've seen an increase in funding, and why we've seen broad support, is because of the leadership of Dana Gioia and the people that we have at the National Endowment of the Arts today are taking arts to the communities, and it's been very well received.
Very good. Thank you. Debbie, as I look on the panel, I recognize you're the only woman that we have on the panel. Some might think it a little bit unbalanced, but I would suggest that with Debbie, her being the one woman on the panel is a balance. It takes all the rest of us to make up to her.
Okay.
So
I'm used to it.
delighted to see you, and I wanted to ask about, you probably grew up like so many people did, hearing that, well, don't go into the arts because there's no future in that. You can't make a career of it. Obviously, you have defied that whole image dramatically. What do you say to parents, not just to the students, who I'm sure you encourage, but to parents who discourage their children from an arts education for fear that there's not a career path in this?
As one who is actively on the ground in the field, because I have a big dance school and I do what I call global community service. I travel around the world and represent America in dance to Middle East, China, India, around the world. And this is a conversation that happens globally, not just here in America. Somehow when you don't understand the value of the arts in your children's lives, you're not encouraging your children to look up at the sky. What I mean by that is, I'm from a little place called Houston, Texas. And when I grew up in the late 50s and 60s, everything was segregated. I couldn't go to the park, I couldn't go to the movies, I couldn't go to the restaurants, but I couldn't go to dance class. And my mother moved to Mexico City, where I was embraced and where I was impacted by the Diego Rivera murals and another culture, another language. And what I mean by looking up at the sky is that when you think of yourself in the arts, you think of yourself as a child of the universe, not in a small place like Houston, Texas, which does change, because people change. It's the nature of the universe that it's going to change. But if you don't somehow allow your children to know that they can grow up looking at the sky and seeing themselves and going as far as they can see and think. This is who I was as a child. The arts can rescue your children. The arts can rescue this country. Cultural diplomacy is one of the greatest weapons we have. As I've traveled to China, the Middle East, everywhere, I was going to places where I was scared to go. This man named Osama invited me to come to the Middle East. I said, "Ooh, honey, no, I'm not going there." But I went, and I learned, and they said, "They don't dance like you here." I said, "Yes, they do. Y'all got the internet." "Yes, they do." Well, I found out they do. In China, in India, everywhere. They dress like us. They talk, they dance. They want to be like us. So parents need to understand that the arts, in the forefront of global politics, economic power, all of that, the arts is character education, the discipline, the sense of confidence, the sense of success, the connect with the creative part of you will catapult you somewhere beyond where you think you might want to go. I only wanted to dance. That's all I ever wanted to do. I ended up producing Amistad with Steven Spielberg. I ended up being the artistic director of the Academy Awards for 10 years. I mean, I've done all these things when I was, as a child, challenged to not be able to even go to dance class. But the dancing, the pain of the dance, because it hurts to do all these things you want to do. When you train in the arts, you are training under great criticism, so you are getting tough. So when the critics come after me and say this, whatever, my ballet teacher was worse. I can keep going. You learn how to do things on very small budgets. We never have money. We're the gypsies. We're the first thing that's cut. I totally believe today, as I said to Mrs. Bush over dinner one night, I think No Child Left Behind would have worked if the arts had been right there. Because we wouldn't be developing a generation of well-tested but uneducated, not well-educated kids. We would end up with a plethora of young people who want to go to school. If I could go in the public school system and set up a crumping class, that's fight dancing, y'all might know what that is, that's fight dancing. Crumping class, hip hop pros versus the 19th century poets. I mean, there are many classes that we could create. The innovative process of education is what the arts can bring to us as human beings. So I say to the parents, you have to look up at the sky and let your children look up at the sky. Give them the arts, and they will be more disciplined. They will be true humanitarian human beings. And we can reclaim who we are here in America with the arts.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Debbie. You know, one of the things I want to point out, and I think Debbie is right, that there was an impact of No Child Left Behind, but I want to be fair to both the President and Ted Kennedy, who helped get it passed, that the problem with No Child Left Behind was not in even the legislation as it was originally intended, because for the first time, a lot of people don't realize this, No Child Left Behind had in the core curriculum music and art education as part of the core. It's the first time in America that had ever happened. And I remember Rod Page and I had many conversations. It was during my tenure as governor. That was the good part. The bad part was that as it was implemented in local areas and at the state level, if states did not create a mechanism by which to evaluate the music and art programs, and they weren't tested on it and therefore being held accountable for it, states just said, well, if we're only going to be held accountable for math and reading, then we'll only focus on those things. And the impact was the polar opposite of what was intended. So the fix is not to take the core curriculum out, which is in there. The fix is to make sure that we have a way to hold school districts accountable for the implementation of the core that is already in No Child Left Behind. And I think that that would make a dramatic difference. That's something we have to make sure we push at the state and local levels.
So that the arts is not a footnote, which is
Exactly.
what it is.
It is.
It is a footnote. If it was right up there, I do musical theater productions every year in Washington and Los Angeles, and we energize thousands of kids that get to come. And a book is always at the core. More kids write essays and start creating their own books after seeing our productions. So many schools would not let their kids come because they were afraid they would miss their math class. Mm-hmm. Because that's what they had to be responsible for. And if the school doesn't pass that, then the principal may be fired, the teachers reassigned, the school could be dismissed. So again, No Child Left Behind, yes, it was great in its engineering and its idea, but it put the arts as a footnote, not right there where it belongs, right there. So
Perfect segue to ask Tom Horn, first of all, to hit that low E for us. I know I couldn't do it. Tom, let's talk about the implementation, because there has been, in many states, almost a complete ignoring of the value of music and art education. And tell me from your perspective, what are the greatest challenges, and how do you, as a state Director of Education, Secretary of Education in your state. How do you try to make that happen?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Before I say anything, though, I want to introduce you to my wife, Marty, because she has her master's degree from Juilliard as a harpist,
Wow.
and which makes her overqualified to do what she does now, which is drive me around the state. In my 2006 re-election, she drove me the equivalent of halfway around the Earth at the equator.
Wow.
So, Marty, if you would. Well, when I advocate for the arts, which is one of my prime goals as state superintendent, I divide the arguments into two different categories, the intrinsic and the instrumental. Intrinsic, arts for its own sake as an end in life, and instrumental, all the evidence that we have that show that students who are immersed in the arts do better academically. So when I talk about the arts as an intrinsic value that we do for its own sake, I like to quote John Adams, who is an ancestor actually of my wife Marty, who it's actually not an exact quote because the original quote is wordy as he could be. It's a little more concise, but basically what he said was, we study war and politics so that our children can study business and commerce, so that their children can study literature and the arts. I think that really tells us what education is all about and really what life is all about. At the end of everything else we do is to arrive at the appreciation of beauty. And if I have a little more time, I like to quote the funeral oration of Pericles, where he said, "The love of the life of the mind does not make us soft, and the love of beauty does not make us profligate." So I advocate for the arts because I think students need the arts as the end in life. That's really what it's all about. But in addition to that, the arts are a means to an end, and that is greater academic achievement. And we have lots and lots of studies that show that. In one study, they divided young children into thirds. 1/3 were given computers, 1/3 were given violins, and 1/3 were control group, weren't given anything. And which do you think was the group that ended up doing the best in math? The violins. In Arizona, we had such a study. In the Tucson Unified District, we have something called Opening Minds Through the Arts, OMA. We call it OMA, where the kids in elementary school, they learn first recorders and they learn string instruments. They write their own opera. When I arrive at an OMA school, it's very inspiring because all the kids are out greeting me playing violins, violas, and cellos. And in their language scores, the kids were 30% above the control schools. This is a study by WestEd, which is a federally funded laboratory. And for the Latino kids, for some reason we don't understand, it had a special resonance, they were 55% higher in the language scores. So in the OMA schools, we were closing the gap, and in the other schools, we weren't. So the teaching of the arts gives you better academic scores. So if you want to improve your reading and your math scores, you need to have more arts, not less arts. And so using that study as a basis, I used $4 million of No Child Left Behind money that was designated for innovative programs. It's Title V. Congressman, I hope will restore funding of Title V, because there was a temporary decision to cut it. But we have hopes that you'll restore Title V funding. And I used that to expand arts education. And when I did it, I was afraid I would be criticized because it was intended for improving academics, and I used it for the arts. But a letter came out from then Secretary Rod Page. It went to all the superintendents in the country, responding to the criticism that No Child Left Behind had cut back on the funding of on teaching the arts. And he made the point that you made, Governor, that the arts are a core curriculum under No Child Left Behind. And he held us out as an example. That we used $4 million of No Child Left. So rather than being criticized, I was held up as an example to the other superintendents around the country. Now, you really hit the nail on the head. The problem is assessment, because we assess reading, math, and now science. And there are two areas that we don't assess, and I think this is the biggest criticism of No Child Left Behind. One is history. So the teaching of history has suffered, and the other is the arts. And we are developing an arts assessment in my state, and then I have to sell it to our legislature and my state board, so long as the federal government doesn't require that assessment.
By the way, Oklahoma and Kentucky both have very innovative and strong assessment programs for the arts. They're probably the two state leaders in that arena. And a lot of states are beginning to look at their approach to that. John Rich, you've done all right in the arts, and it's been good to you. Let me just talk about your growing up. You came up in a musical family, so it was a part of your life. Did you as a child say, one day I'm going to do this professionally, or did you evolve into that and it just happened? And tell me about when you were in school. And it's kind of a longer question, but I want to give you an opportunity to, when you were a child growing up, was there a component of what was happening in your school that encouraged you, or that sparked in you that idea that, hey, I could do this and I could make this my life?
I grew up in Amarillo, Texas, up in the Panhandle, in a Hispanic trailer park called Tierra Grande Trailer Park. My dad is a preacher that preaches in English and Spanish. 8 o'clock was in Spanish, 10 o'clock was in English. Our next door neighbor was the head mechanic to the Banditos motorcycle gang. And I was friends with all his kids. To me, the great thing about music, and when music is available to you at school, it breaks down barriers of race. It breaks down barriers of financial status. It breaks down the cool kids and the not so cool kids. Doesn't matter, because if every kid's got a trumpet, or every kid's got a whatever they're playing, and you got first chair, second chair, third chair, fourth chair, sometimes the cool kids fourth chair and the poor kids first chair. Yeah. And it completely shifts the balance of how you think about yourself. You know, when you haven't had when you're going to the food bank to get food every couple of months, you know, and the other kids are wearing brand new Nikes to school, that can be a little detrimental to your mental status at school. But when you can pick up an instrument and you can rip that scale better than that kid, it really levels the playing field in a lot of ways. And to me, on a real basic level of music in school and how it impacts everything else that you're going to do for the rest of your life, music is the only thing introduced to anybody in school that I can think of that is virtually limitless in its nature. Music has no limitation whatsoever. You have rhythm, you have words, you have notes. Those three things can be combined in a billion, in a trillion different ways. Nobody can tell you how it should be or should not be at the end of the day. That's why we have so many different kinds of music, so many different successes, and the wheel gets reinvented about every 10 years in the music business. I'm living proof. I make country music like people haven't made country music. There's a guy here today, Cowboy Troy, sitting on the front row, a friend of mine, who has combined successfully, very successfully, country music, hard rock, rap, and he speaks 4 different languages and incorporates Spanish into his rap, and is huge at country music concerts, massive. Has been an inspiration to all kinds of people. So I guess a lot of the semantics of how you get people to actually fund it and show them that it's paying off, that's up to you guys. That's why you're the governors and congressmen and all that. But I can tell you from a real day-to-day standpoint, from a guy like me, if you can show a kid that something is limitless, and it truly is limitless, and they experience a limitless thing with music, and that ever clicks in their head, they will apply that to engineering, or to being a farmer, or to whatever it is that could impact the rest of the world, or politics, or anything else they want to do. And I think on a real basic level, when you are 5 to 12, 13 years old, it is absolutely mandatory that has to be available to you.
Tom Cochran is the director of the U.S. Conference of Mayors. They've had a very strong leadership role in advocacy for music and the arts, and they give awards every year in Washington in their large event that they bring the mayors together. Very significant organization, often called a part of what's in the lobbying circles known as the Big Seven. 7 major key fundamental organizations. Conference of Mayors, very involved in the arts. Tom, why would mayors be involved? Why would they care? And what's the future that municipal governments will play in the promotion of music and the arts?
Thank you, Governor, and thank you so much for your leadership in this area. Let me just quickly say that today, my president, Mayor Manny Diaz, the mayor of Miami, has been reaching out for Gustav and the relief in that area. And I just have to say something about that, if you would give me a minute. As you know, New Orleans is a center of the globe for culture and arts. And as you know, when we almost lost New Orleans with Katrina, it really affects the soul and the spirit of this nation. And so we were threatened again, yesterday, and God was on our side, but it hit Baton Rouge real hard. And so we're today praying and working with the private sector and FEMA and all the governors to make sure that the Gulf region, which gave us the blues, which gave us Marsalis Brothers, which gave us Louis Armstrong, and which continue to give, is so important. Why is it important to us? We have the cities of America, and in 1976, we decided that arts means business. And so Maynard Jackson, the mayor of Atlanta, with a young lady who worked with him named Shirley Franklin, who's now the mayor, appealed to President Carter to elevate the arts in the national arena. Today, we have met with Senator McCain twice, and of course we have mayors that are meeting with Senator Obama. The Conference of Mayors is calling on 5 different areas, and I want all of you to know that arts is up there with transportation and crime and the environment. So what you're saying, and Governor Huckabee has really given us a lot of help on this because of your candidacy and the way that you have spoken up. So we spent a lot of time talking about the National Endowment. And of course, we were there when it was being taken away, and we worked so hard to save it. And but what we're saying to the next president is we need to look at the mayors in this hemisphere. I mean, the countries in this hemisphere, south of us. Every one of them has a minister of culture. If you look at Paris, they have a minister of culture. If you look at all the industrialized nations, there's a cabinet level for the arts. And so we're calling for the next president of the United States to have a cabinet level person that will be there in the White House with a different department, working arts through the Labor Department, through training, working arts through every one of those. Working arts through across the federal government and of course through the state governments. You all know what the great cities of America are. But I travel, not like Debbie does, but I travel. And you walk the streets of any capital or any city in the world, and you'll hear Elvis, you'll hear Frank Sinatra, you'll hear Hank Williams. You walk down the street, you'll see Tennessee Williams. You'll see this stuff. I mean, Americans should be proud of what they're giving to this earth for arts and culture and movies. Because if we're going to restore what we need to restore with America, we must use the arts, and I agree with what you're saying, Debbie. So we're out there because, number one, Mayor Daley has said, you can take the Chicago Bears out. But give me a Monet exhibit for 3 weeks, and they will come, they will worship, and they will buy. So you look at these museums. You've got them. I was in Indianapolis. I'm telling you right now, the great museums there. And everybody goes into those gift shops and buys $600 worth of something. I don't know what to do. But you look at the budgets and what people are spending. And I haven't gotten into food. That's a piece of the arts here too. Tourism connected with the arts. Mr. Jonathan Tish of the Travel Business Roundtable, Mr. Bill Marriott, 2 bipartisan leaders. Japanese person comes to New York City, they spend $6. You go to New York City, you spend $1. And so international travel is very, very important. France spends $4 billion a year promoting Paris. Federal government gives us nothing to promote people coming to cities and states. So we're on a roll here, talking to Senator McCain and Senator Obama, and I would just want to say one more time, you've helped us, Governor, to get this issue lifted up, and you brought us across the river. We're going to take it to the mountaintop.
All right. Well said.
We might suggest to McCain or Obama that the next Secretary for Arts and Culture could be Governor Huckabee.
Well, you're being awfully generous. I'm just hoping my band gets better gigs, that's all. You and Governor Bluff both brought up the economic impact of the arts. In a similar way, both Debbie and I think John did the same thing from a different perspective as artists, but from an economic development standpoint. I'm going to ask all the panelists, if you would, I know our time is running out, we're going to have to close here in a moment, but before we do, I'd like to ask each of you to tell me what you think is, if you could sum up and go on national television tonight to America and say, here is my message as why the arts have to be given a greater level of priority, what would your message be? And if you could, hold it to, a 30-second commercial, just like we usually have to do in political campaigns. And Matt, you're a master at that, so let me begin with you.
I think the number one reason is the long-term reason, and I think Todd, you touched upon it, just the creative nature of the American economy. We cannot compete for the lowest wage jobs or the lowest skilled products, but the strength of America is creativity, and the arts are directly related to that creative spirit. So I think that's long-term the most important thing. Lots of short-term immediate benefits, tourism that we talked about, but long-term, just ensuring that we maintain that creative edge that we do have over the rest of the world.
John?
I have to follow a governor for a national commercial. I would say the future of the youth of America begins with 8 things: do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti.
And now nobody wants to follow you. But Tom, you have to.
Well, I take it from the educational point of view. We have education for 3 reasons. We have to prepare students for jobs. We have to prepare them to be citizens. That's why history is so important. But we have to prepare them to be human beings. And you can't be a human being who enjoys all that we've inherited from centuries of development without a full appreciation of the arts. And then when we talk about preparing them for jobs, not only do we have evidence that they do better with their math skills and their reading and their writing skills if they're immersed in the arts, but the trends now are toward the creative skills in the job market. And I was introduced to an large engineering company that requires arts background for their applicants, because for the mechanical aspects of engineering, they can get it done cheaper overseas. But they need our people with creative skills that go along with their engineering skills. And so now they're saying they will only look at graduates of engineering school who have an arts background. And that's the beginning sign of the direction the country is going in, that for the very high income jobs, people have to be not only capable of doing things, but they have to be creative in the way they do things. And an arts background makes people more creative.
Very good.
Okay, the commercial. You want to know how to run a family, a school, how to run a research center, a big corporation, how to run this country? We need creative thinking, critical analysis, inquiry. We need the arts.
Arts is the heart, the soul, and the pocketbook of the metro areas of our cities that make up this great nation.
Well, I have to follow everybody, John, not just the government. But I believe that the arts are who we are today and who we are going to be in the future. And if we want a future that has a lot of hope and opportunity for our kids and for ourselves, we have to make sure that we invest in the arts today, and that it's not in just the cities, if I may, with all due respect, Tom, but it's also in every community, whether it's rural or urban. It's in every school, and it's in every one of our hearts. And I think that we have to do that by investing today.
Thank you very much. Let me ask all of you to take a couple of homework assignments. If you have not read Richard Florida's book, The Rise of the Creative Class, most of this group probably has, I highly recommend it. You may not agree with all of the things that he may say, but one of the things I hope you will come away agreeing with is regarding the economic impact of creativity. And it's a masterful book in that regard, and I wish every politician and every decision maker had to read it just for the stimulation of thought. Rise of the Creative Class. It's been out for several years. The other one is a book that you may not be as familiar with, but I hope you become familiar with, by Sir Ken Robinson of the Getty Foundation, called Out of Their Minds. And it is a book about the value of creativity. And if you've ever heard Sir Ken speak, you know that he's one of the most masterful communicators. I had him come speak to the National Governors Association. I think people were saying, oh, somebody's going to talk about the arts. We don't want to hear that. By the time it was over, they all wanted him to come to their state. He's an absolutely brilliant communicator, but the substance is so powerful. And so that's homework assignment number 1. Number 2, you didn't come to this seminar because you had no real interest at all in the arts. You didn't come here because you just needed a place to be that was out of the rain. You obviously came here already fired up for music education and arts for all of Americans. But it doesn't do us a lot of good if we just pat ourselves on the back about how much we love it if we don't do something to implement it. One of the things I urge you to do is to become politically active, not on the partisan standpoint, but from a positional standpoint, politically active in influencing your local legislator. Now, I think Congress is important with the role that they play in funding for the National Endowment, but I ultimately believe that the way we move music and art activity and legislation is at the state level, because that's where educational curriculums are really run. They're not run at the federal level, at the state level. Influence key legislators. Find some that will be your champions. Get a bipartisan group, and you'll be surprised. You know, Republicans do like art too. I want you to know that. You've got a Republican governor, Republican congressman. You know, there's several of us here. You'd just be amazed that we're not all anti-art. In fact, I find some of the strongest advocates. It's a great opportunity to build a bipartisan coalition. And I'll tell you something that if nothing else works in influencing your local politician, surveys have shown that 90% of American parents want their children to be in music and arts classes. Now look, you don't have to be the biggest, best, or smartest politician to be able to read and understand a 90% poll of anything. So if nothing else, help them to understand that this is an issue that has no political downside. It really doesn't. But more importantly, it has a great American upside. And that's why we ought to push it, because it's the right thing to do for our kids. Most all of us are here on this stage out of a sense of sheer passion. And I loved hearing Debbie's story of a young girl growing up in Houston, Texas. I see where she is now, and I think about where she started. And the arts became her ticket to where she is. And when I hear John's story, growing up there in Amarillo, Texas, in the trailer park, and I see where he is now and at the top of his game and producing the top albums in the country as well as performing, and I realize that music was his ticket. But it's not just musicians. Back in the 60s, there was a kid who wanted a guitar. Parents couldn't afford it. But like so many kids, he just begged and begged and begged for a guitar. Really no hope to get it. But Christmas 1966, his parents ordered an electric guitar from the JCPenney catalog and paid $99 for the guitar, the amplifier, and the instruction book for the whole thing. That may not seem like a lot of money, but $99 was so much money to that family that it took the parents a year paying it out by the month in order to pay for it. That kid played the guitar. He played it and played it till his fingers almost bled. And it became a very important part of his life, helping him to develop confidence, helping him to get over an incredible innate shyness that really had limited a lot of opportunities. And I know some of you are saying, okay, tell me, did he win a Grammy? Is he a major recording star? No. In fact, it wasn't that he didn't try. He wasn't really that good. But he did become the 43rd governor of Arkansas, and he hosted this event today. Thank you very, very much. Thanks. God bless you.